Welcome back to Most Self-Improved, a podcast where we're trying to make small improvements to lead to a more engaging, fulfilling life. I'm Erin Jensen with my lovely co-host, Bhavana Chilukuri.
Hi, everybody.
For this episode, we're speaking with marriage and family therapist, Dr. Ilene Cohen, about authentic happiness. And it's going to be everything I can do to restrain from saying, "Come on, Ilene," when we welcome her to the show. But can we get more happiness? Can we authentically be ourselves and be happy? I'm excited to find the answers to those questions. Bobs, how are you? How happy are you feeling today and lately?
I feel pretty happy. Right now,
Brag about it.
Well, I'll say I'm in Puerto Rico. So I feel like being on an island just naturally increases your happiness. But I don't know. We'll see if that lasts when I get back to the mainland. But in general, I can't complain about anything right now. What about you?
I love how menacing happy, but we'll see sound. Like, ominous. Like it's so great.
We'll see if it lasts.
We'll see. We'll see. I feel pretty good. I feel pretty appreciative. We just had Mother's Day. And I thought just in that moment when I was with family and everybody was there, it was one of those moments where you feel like nothing could change that could make a moment more perfect, So I feel appreciative.
Lovely.
I feel very appreciative. Yeah. So anything you're hoping to learn about happiness? Anything you're really wanting to know?
I'm feeling good now. I'm feeling pretty happy, but there's been many times where I'm like, get me out of here. Like, I don't like this. I'm very unhappy. And it's been like long stretches of time, right? So sometimes when I think about how happy I feel right now, I remember times when I have not been. And so I think I'd like to know, is there a way to just stay this way? Because realistically, there's going to be more challenges, more things happening. In the face of all that, is there a way to keep that feeling of contentment even as stuff is coming up?
And are we so happy now because we have been so unhappy? Because we know how bad it can be.
Maybe it had to happen. So,
all right, let's use our lifeline. Let's call in Dr. Ilene. Before this gets too dark, we're happy now, but we'll see.
We'll see. Let's get into it.
Let's just bring Dr. Ilene to the podcast. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going? We are so excited to chat with you. First off, easy question, a softball of a question if I had any athletic ability, but tell us what your background and your approach is with your clients.
So I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm trained to see clients relationally and issues in a systemic way. I specifically work from a Bowen family systems theory, which look at the person and their issue they're coming to therapy with, the larger context of their family, whatever's going on in their life. There's not just the family system, but other relationship networks and things like that, and how that impacts their mental health.
And we're so excited to have you here to talk about happiness. I'm curious why happiness is an area of interest for you.
Well, I've written on the topic in the pursuit of happiness, but the way I think I see it is a little bit different. I think in order to reach happiness, you have to have a foundation. And that foundation comes from our values, our principles, and then allowing our behaviors to align with that, as well as how well are we functioning in our day-to-day lives. I think there is a lot of chatter about let's pursue happiness, but if you don't have a certain foundation or that's all you're seeking, then you might be just looking for pleasure or instant gratification. And that will lead you maybe not in the right direction. My view about happiness is to kind of slow down and take a look at ourselves and say, well, how do my relationships look? Because study after study shows the quality of our lives, our level of mental health and happiness comes from our relationships. So how does that look? Am I showing up as who I want to be? Which again, goes back to the values. Am I acting in those ways? And I think over time, then that leads to our overall level of happiness and fulfillment.
I love that so much. We've read about that before, selecting your values and then making sure you're aligned with those, because that does bring a sense of joy. But what can you tell us about selecting your values?
Well, studies show most of our values come from our families of origin. And it's okay to evaluate those. And then with that is also, if we have a certain religion we grow up with or philosophy in life, just looking at those and saying, well, what fits with me and what doesn't? And are my actions showcasing that?
We've talked a little bit about values, and I'm wondering, like, how would you define happiness? Is it living in your values? What's your definition of happiness?
Well, I think it might be different for everybody, and it is a feeling. It's one of those things it's hard to describe, but you know when it's there, it shows up. And I interchange that with joy a lot, that feeling of joy or happiness. And what I found in my personal life is it shows up in the most unexpected ways and comes after something pretty tough and hard. I think that's the difference. Like for me, it was after the delivery of my children, which we all know that's not the easiest thing to do, or defending my dissertation, which was a lot of rigorous and tough work. But it can show up in small moments, like when I'm really connecting with friends or family members and we're doing something we enjoy and we're seeing eye to eye on something and having a meaningful conversation. So I think it is different for everyone, but it is something that when it shows up, you know, oh, this is what that is. And I think what people get tripped on is when they're always trying to seek it. And I think sometimes the pursuit of happiness gets in the way of real happiness because there's a lot of challenges in life and things that feel difficult and aren't easy. And it's normal to have an array of emotions. And I think part of happiness is knowing there are times of sadness or struggle or things that might seem impossible, but happiness comes when you learn to manage, self-regulate, get through it, handle these difficulties the best way you can with grace. And then on the other side is that feeling of joy and happiness.
Thank you. I find it so interesting and frustrating that the idea of seeking this thing that naturally we all want can stop us from getting it. Intellectually, I kind of get it, but I don't know. How do you stop from wanting this thing that feels so natural to want?
Well, I think we all want it, but knowing the difference between that dopamine hit feels good in the moment because we all know it doesn't feel so great later. So say we have a goal in mind of something that is meaningful to us. And say there's this book you always wanted to write or an article and you're having a tough time getting through it. So you just scroll through Instagram or watch a movie, you know, and that might feel good in the moment and pleasurable and eases whatever discomfort you're feeling. And you get that hit of dopamine, but then later you don't feel so great because you didn't.
Yeah, you feel pretty bad about yourself.
Yeah, you feel bad. You didn't reach something you had in mind for yourself and you're not maybe living in a way that's aligning with what it is you want.
Are people just because they're listening to this podcast and are hoping to get happier, are they then going to be unhappier?
No, I just think anything utilized as a way to avoid real life and things like that doesn't end up being helpful. And that's why for me, I just made the shift of pursuing my goals for life and what it is that I want for myself and with my clients as well, just having them lay that all out and making sure their actions align with that. And I know it can be work. We're very busy. We have so many distractions. We just wake up, we scroll social media, we go to our jobs, and we're not really taking a step back to think, is this what I want for my life? You know, my one and only life. It's a pretty big deal. So I think just what I meant in that article was more of like when we're just chasing it or we're trying to pursue it too much, but we're not slowing down and really taking a look at the deeper meaning of our lives. I see nothing wrong with saying, oh, I do want more happiness in my life. Who wants to suffer? I don't want to suffer. But it's finding meaning in that suffering.
Right.
There's a goal at the other end. And I think that's kind of the difference, not just chasing the good feelings. Where does that lead?
What do we need in order to pursue happiness in a healthy way? Like you talked about the importance of relationships and how that is a critical part of it. Are there other pillars of happiness?
A big one is learning how to be our own person in the context of all of purpose. Really thinking through, who am I, and am I showing up as that person in all the areas of my life? And I don't mean it in a selfish way, because I think there is maybe these ideas of only focusing on ourselves and ignoring everything out. But I think that there's a part of it saying, okay, who am I, and what is it that I'm seeing, and how can I be that in whatever work I choose, or in my relationships with others, or in my day-to-day life, and expressing that. I think that is really useful, because none of us feel so great if we're not showing up in certain areas of our lives as who we are. One of my specialties is working with people pleasers. And they're doing things that maybe they grew up with certain values of make everybody else happy, make sure you don't create any trouble, and focus on everybody else around you. And what they're finding is that's not leading to happiness for them. I'm resentful, and especially if the other person in their lives still are demanding more, or whatever they do isn't good enough, it's not working for them. So a challenge for them is to reconnect with themselves and making sure they're showing up and saying, okay, what's okay with me and not just pursuing the happiness for the other person and whatever manages the difficulties in that moment. They're actually sitting back and saying, okay, do I actually want to do this for the other person? Is this going to benefit the relationship? So I think a lot of it is getting clearer in our thinking about things, slowing down and kind of evaluating that, but in a way that's for ourselves, but also for others at the same time.
I want to dive into this, because how are you doing this self-evaluation? What are you asking? How can we do that self-evaluation to see if we're showing up authentically?
Well, so that's a lot of what therapy is about, or even reading. There's tons of great material. But what I do in therapy is we go back generations to see family patterns. And a lot of us in our relationships and lives, we're repeating patterns without realizing. So once we objectively in therapy can identify these patterns, we can decide, are they helpful? Are they useful? Do I want to continue this or not? And because in those moments, especially in our lives when we feel tension or anxiety, we lean towards the patterns. So part of therapy and connecting with who we are and who we want to show up as is seeing, what are my family patterns? What am I prone to given that? What am I doing now that's not useful? But I'm just doing it because I've been programmed, or it's just easier, it feels better to just please and give in. That's what I know. And instead being, okay, now I identify it. What do I want to do next time? And how do I want to conduct myself? And then the more that we do align our behaviors with what we really want instead of the pattern, I find people's level of fulfillment, happiness, joy does go up. You feel better and your relationships look better. And you may be doing more things in your life that do bring up that feeling of joy, instead of just easing that tension or discomfort or anxiety in the moment for doing something different.
So it kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning of, you tend to feel this level of happiness after you've gone through something hard. It's not, if I get this thing, I'll be happy. But the actual path to authentic happiness is looking at yourself, dealing with the hard things about yourself, which we don't want to do that, right? It's a pain. It's much easier to be in the pattern. So it's just such a different and interesting way to look at how you actually become happy.
It is, because the other is pleasure. It's that dopamine hit. I said later, it's not what brings the lasting happiness, joy in your life, or that feeling of consistent contentment.
I'm wondering about goals. I have an expectation that if I achieve my goals, I'm going to be happy. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to be really upset. And so if I have a goal of writing a book, it takes a lot of work. It takes yourself saying no to scrolling, no to distractions. And then hopefully when that thing comes out, I want to feel happy. But that is an external thing. It's something that I hope I create that people then read. But I've heard a lot about you shouldn't expect that, or you can feel something, but it is going to be fleeting, even though it feels like a much bigger thing than an ice cream cone. So I'm wondering, when you think about those big goals, can we expect to be happy? What's the relationship between happiness and goals?
When the goal is just attached to because it will make me happy, that's where we go wrong. Because happiness isn't just a one-time thing. We reach it. I know we've been told in fairy tales, and now we're happily ever after. No. Happiness is, I'm sure you heard the quote, it's a journey, it's not a destination. But if you're writing a book and your goal is to write a book because this is something that is coming from who you are and what you want for your life, an expression of you, then that will bring a lot of fulfillment, even in the process. There's going to be hard moments, but you will have that sense of fulfillment and happiness. But if you're attaching your happiness to it or how well it's going to do, going to be big, then it probably will lead to disappointment. Also, this gets me thinking about seeking happiness from within or without. And a lot of us attach it to something external. And this is when we seek approval or when we reach a certain money in our bank account or whatever we think will be happy. And I think it's one of the comedians, he said, I would hope everybody gets rich and successful and famous.
Oh, yeah. I think it's Jim Carrey. Yeah.
And it speaks so much to that because I think that's what they're chasing. And when they realize this isn't it, then it's more disappointing and depressing. And then you're like, okay, you just give up. But when you see again, it goes back to, it really is coming from within. Am I showing up as me? This is what I want? Because if you want to become a movie star, it's because you enjoy the craft. It's a question of your skills and who you are, then it's not attached to anything. So that's what I would say. It has to come from within. When we attach it to the external, it becomes more about pleasure and seeking, and then it's fleeting in that way because it's attached to something.
Then what should the goal be? Rather than I want the New York Times bestseller, I want the Malibu Beach mansion, I want Malibu Ken. Like, what are we? How should we be forming those goals to where we are enjoying the destination? It is not so outcome based.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having goals. I think that's wonderful. I just think when we attach all our happiness to it, I'm not going to be happy till I get there.
Yeah.
We lose sight of what we have today. So I think it's okay. Am I living the way I want to today? And then I have goals for later, and I hope it happens, and I put that on my goals, but it's not going to determine if I'm going to be happy or not in this life. For me, I write books. If one became a New York bestseller, it would be more of, I did something meaningful and good work that a lot of people appreciated it. But my process with writing is because I'm really expressing things that I enjoy talking about. And it's coming out of me and my best thinking, and I enjoy it. Of course, I'm not going to lie. If I got 0-star reviews on it, it would probably affect me like, okay, maybe nobody's connecting with this. But most fulfillment from it is because it is coming from that place and I'm enjoying the process. And it's kind of like a creative process. And for me, that's fulfilling.
In one of your articles, you refer to a Buddhist quote that says, "Our suffering comes from our attachment to people and things and our repeated attempts to find something lasting where there is nothing lasting to be found," which sounds kind of depressing. Talk to us about that quote and how we can take something helpful away from that when it sounds a little scary.
And that's the thing. You see, the more we lean into the scary and think about, instead of avoiding it or distancing, the more comfortable we get around it, the Buddhist monks or whatnot. So I think that speaks to also what we were talking about with attachment. The meaning is attachment to things. It doesn't mean that we're not connected to people. We don't care about them or connected to things in our lives. But I think it's when you attach, I'm only going to be happy if I'm in this relationship. I'm only going to be happy if I get that bestseller or that house in Malibu, that, you're attaching or your worthiness. I'm only going to be of worth when X and Y, Z happens, versus already knowing that nothing is permanent and things fleet, but I can hopefully stay solid in who I am in all these avenues, knowing my worth, knowing my value, and expressing who I am.
That's what I think is so hard, because I would like the husband and the kids. It's like when you want these things that you think actually matter, it's kind of hard to be like, okay, we're good and we can be happy without them. But sometimes you just really want things to work out.
Right. And then you get them like me and you're like, what happened to that single life? Well, I took a nap in the middle of the day. I could go to dinner without paying $500 for a babysitter.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to say $500 for dinner. I was like, at Panera, I know it's so I can't imagine that. Anytime I go anywhere, I'm like, timesing this by 4, I would never eat. Okay. Any other misconceptions or things that you want people to know about happiness that might make them feel happier just by knowing them?
I would say it's more complicated than just saying, oh, let's seek this thing called happiness. And I would say just slow down and start just looking at your relationships and how you're functioning in them and what patterns you're repeating, what you like to change if you're at a place in your life that you're happy with or not. And you might not be happy with it, but you know that you're moving in the right direction. So yes, you might want a husband, wife, house, kids, things like that. And it might not be what you have right now, but you are putting yourself out there, dating, talking to people. You're on the avenue for it. You know that whatever you're doing is aligning with that possibly coming into your life. And you're not like saying, oh, I want all this stuff. And then you're just staying home and not going.
It's tempting. It's real.
It does feel better in the moment. Dating is not fun. And that's what I'm saying. Let's slow down and learn to manage those things and make sure our behaviors align with what making sure we're fostering those.
Okay. I loved that conversation. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. We like to end by sharing what we're going to take away. And then of course you can hear that, Dr. Ilene, and how you've fixed our lives in 45 minutes. Okay. Bob, what are you taking away?
I've never thought about it comes when you've done the hard work internally. I've always thought about it of like, oh, externally, if I do this work and get that thing, just like noticing yourself more, which it's easy to not do. It's easy to be like, I'm not going to notice myself today. I don't want to do that. So I find that just really helpful. So thank you.
I love that. That's what I'm taking too. The ask yourself, is this what I want? Is this how I want to be showing up? Is this the life that I want to be living? So I love that. And then the one that I'm less excited about, but need to embrace is the yucky discomfort. That is where we will grow and seems so scary, but I'm so excited about that. To our audience, I speak for Bhavana and myself when I say that we would love to hear what struck you from today's episode, what you're going to be taking and applying to your life. And let us know on Instagram at Most Self-Improved. I keep waiting for the day when someone's going to share their deepest, darkest secrets and life story there. And it would certainly make us happy if you would do that, or if you want to share this episode with a friend. We hope you have a fantastic, happy week full of fulfilling, permanent happiness.
Rainbows and butterflies.